In this video, we're going to recreate the tabs submenu from the UberMenu demo site. Now before we get started, I just want to note that we're working with the same hierarchical structure that we have been in all the other submenu types. This is just a different format. So just like there's a tree structure with flyout right, birds, and there's a tree structure with mega menu, standard, soccer, we have that same descendant tree structure here with our tabs. It's simply a different format. So in a standard mega menu submenu, we have columns where the headers appear at the top of the submenu and their child items appear below them. In our tabs submenu, it's the same hierarchical structure. We're just displaying it instead with the tabs on the left and their submenu content to the right. So this entire section is what's called the tabs block, and that includes the tab toggles on the left and the tab content panel on the right. So Europe is a tab toggle, and its submenu is the content panel for this tab, and that includes this content: Santorini, Mont Blanc, and Eiffel Tower. Now, this content doesn't have to just be 3 columns of images. It can be any content you like, just like in the mega submenu or in the images submenu or in the advanced submenu. But this is just what we've used in the demo, as this is a common layout. So let's get started recreating this tabs submenu. So far we've done the flyout submenu, the mega menu submenu, the images, and the advanced submenus. Now we're going to add our items in the tabs submenu. So we'll switch over to our menus panel. And to create a tabs panel, we add an advanced item. We choose the tabs block. We'll make the tabs block a child item of our tabs top level item. Now, the tabs item on its own doesn't actually create any content. It's just a wrapper that will put other items in, which will generate our toggles and the submenu content, or the tab content panel content. So just so you can see what happens, we'll save the menu. So you can see we now have a submenu, but there's nothing here. So this prompts us to actually create some tabs by adding child items to the tab item. And notice that this UberMenu notice, or any UberMenu notices like this, will only appear to logged in admin users. You won't see this, or your end users won't see this while you're building it. So if I open a window where I'm not logged in, you'll see nothing actually appears there. Alright, so in our demo, we have Asia, Europe, Latin America, and North America as our tab toggles. So let's start off by adding those. These are locations, which are a custom taxonomy that I have in this setup. You can, of course, use any menu items you like. Generally, terms make the most sense, but it doesn't matter what type of menu item you use. So I'm just going to check these and add them to my menu. And I'm going to make them child items of the tabs item. The way tabs work are that their direct children will create the tab toggles, and any children of those children will become the content that's revealed when you hover over those toggles. So let's save this menu. Now you'll see that we have our 4 toggles, but obviously there's nothing actually in the submenu yet. So what we do is to add content, we add child items to each of these items. So just as an example, the first item we have under Asia is Mt Fuji. So let's add that item. Again, I'm using a custom post type here, but you'll add whatever content happens to be on your site. Note that I added that item as a child item of the Asia item. So again, Asia, Europe, Latin America, North America are going to be the toggles. And anything that's a child item, like Mt Fuji here, will appear in the submenu for each of those toggles. So now when I refresh the home page, you'll see that when we toggle over Asia or hover over Asia, we'll see Mt Fuji. And if we were to add a submenu item to Europe, the first one there we have is Santorini. Make that a child item of Europe. You'll see that now when we hover over Europe, Santorini is displayed. When we hover over Asia, Mt Fuji is displayed. Now before we get into actually adding the images like we have in the demo, I just want to show you what happens if you add an additional level, because this tab content panel here ends up working just like a mega submenu. So you can add whatever content you like here, and if you continue to add additional levels, you'll start to create columns. So let's just add something random here. This item's just for demonstration. Obviously, it doesn't make sense to put the catcher in the rye as a child item of Mt Fuji, but it's just to show you how the layout will be affected. Alright, so you can see that that item becomes a submenu item under Mt Fuji. And if we were to keep adding items like that, and let's also add another second level item just so you can see what happens here. You can see now when we hover over Asia, we're getting these columns just like we can build columns under Mega Menu. Alright, so that was just to give you an idea of how this works. For the purposes of recreating the demo, you can see that we don't actually have any sub-items within this content panel. We've just got 3 items with images. So I'm going to come back here and delete those that I just added. Alright, now let's add our image to Mt Fuji. Select that image, save our item, I also need to save the menu because I deleted some items. So to make those items, to actually remove those items, we have to resave the menu. And now you'll see that Mt Fuji has an image. Obviously, this isn't the size we're going for. What we want to do is have each image take up a third of this content panel, and we want the text to be left aligned, as shown here. So what we're going to do is we're going to open up the submenu settings for Asia, because remember, this is actually a submenu of Asia that we're dealing with. And we're going to, in the submenu panel, now make sure, because we're working with tabs, that you leave this to automatic. If you switch it to one of these other types, it's not going to work properly within tabs submenu. So we're going to change our submenu column default to 1/3. And now you'll see that this item only takes up 1/3 of the submenu, and if we add additional items, they will also take up 1/3, so we'll end up with 3 items of equal width. The other thing we want to do is adjust our image layout, so that the image is positioned above, and therefore the text will align properly to the left. So now let's add our next item, which is the Great Wall. Once again, we've added that item. We make it a child item of Asia. At this point, we'll use assign image on save, so we don't actually have to pick our image. That's because this post has the image that we want to use already set as a featured image, so it'll just inherit that automatically once we save this. And we want to set our layout to image above. So let's save that and save our menu. We'll refresh this. And there's our second item. Now we'll add our third item, which is Maya Bay. Alright, so now we've pretty much recreated the first tab. But we'll see that these images are spaced a bit differently. These images are spaced equally along with their edges, like a grid, whereas these have the default spacing still. So what we'll want to do is open the submenu settings for our Asia item and click on the submenu tab. And we'll scroll all the way down to this grid submenu setting. Save that setting. And you'll see now our images appear equally spaced from the edges as well as between one another as a grid. So now we've pretty much recreated our first tab, but before we continue, if you've noticed, our toggles column is a different width on our recreation site from our demo site. You see they're a bit narrow here. So we can control settings like that by clicking on the item settings for the tabs, and we can change the tab's toggle layout width. So let's set that to 1/5. You see this is what it was before. And when we refresh, now our toggles only take up 1/5, which means we have additional space for our content on the right. So when we're changing these settings, note that there's also a setting for the panels layout width. And obviously we want the toggles layout width and the panels layout width to add up to 1 in almost every case. So by leaving the panels layout width set to automatic, it will automatically choose the complementary column width to our tab toggles width. But you can change it manually if you have a reason to have the panels layout width not extend the full width of the tab block. We can also set the panels columns default here instead of in each individual submenu, and this will be inherited by all the different by all of our submenus, so that we don't have to set this on Europe and Latin America and North America. And as well as the grid panel setting can be set at this level as well. Generally, we want to leave the Show Default panel checked by default. This means that when the menu first loads, the top tab will automatically be displayed. If you disable that, then nothing will be displayed by default until you hover over one of the tabs. We can also set the trigger here. The default trigger is hover, but you can also set it to click. So if we set it to click, the tabs won't be toggled on hover, but instead they'll toggle when we actually click them. So now we've pretty much created our first tab panel here. And we want the rest to do pretty much exactly the same thing if we look at the demo that we're trying to recreate. So I'm going to show you a little trick that we can use to use these same settings across the additional menu items that we're going to add, so that we don't have to change the image and the item layout on every single item. But you need to be aware that using this setting, you have to be very careful with the way you use it. If you're not careful, you can really cause lots of problems in your menu. So we know that Mt Fuji is sort of we'd like to use this item's defaults for the next items that we add. So I'm going to open that menu item settings up and hover over this little gear and use this Set as Defaults button. Now what this is going to do is it's going to change the system defaults for all menu items to the current settings for this menu item. So this is not something that you want to leave on full time. You just want to do it temporarily to add new items. So if I save this and then refresh, what you'll see is that any items that have had their settings saved won't be affected. But any items that haven't been saved in the past, their current settings are still based on the defaults. So you'll see that all of those will change and it's going to look like a mess. So I'll refresh this page and see, now look, we never saved the settings for advanced or for dynamic. So they're inheriting settings from the Fuji item, which is obviously not what we want. Everything is inheriting the Fuji item now. So now again, this is easy to fix. We just disable that, click Reset Defaults, and now we're back to the way things were. The defaults have been restored to the plugin, the out-of-the-box defaults, and that's just fine. So, but the way this is useful is for adding additional items that should be identical to Mt Fuji. So, for example, we know that we want to add, under Europe, Mont Blanc and Eiffel Tower. So we know we want it to work like Mt Fuji. We're going to click Set as Defaults. We save this. Now the defaults are set to Mt Fuji's defaults. We're going to add the Mont Blanc and Eiffel Tower items. Now we'll save our menu. And remember, we haven't actually saved the menu item settings for those two new items that we've added so far. So they too will be inheriting the defaults. So you can see these look all messed up again. And under Europe, you'll see that Santorini, Mont Blanc, and Eiffel Tower are all inheriting the defaults from Mt Fuji. But what you'll see is we've also got the item layout is obviously the image above, because our text is aligned to the left instead of aligned as if there were supposed to be an image to the left of it. So once we refresh the menus panel, you'll see that the new defaults for each of the menu items which haven't been saved yet, you'll see that we have it set to assign image on save, which is what our settings were for the item that we've set the defaults to. And we have our layout set to image above. So now Mont Blanc, again, we haven't saved these settings yet. Mont Blanc is currently defaulting to that Mt Fuji image. But as soon as we save these settings, and therefore it's going to assign the image on save, now there's our Mont Blanc photo. Do the same thing with the Eiffel Tower. So those settings will all be inherited. All we have to do is save the menu item. And there's our Eiffel Tower image. Now obviously the menu still looks like a mess, so we just want to do reset defaults. And now the image is back to what we want. The menu is back to what we want. So let's add the rest of our items in the same way. So Eiffel Tower works, we want to use these defaults. So set as defaults, save menu item. Now let's add our Latin America and North America items, which are Patagonia, Machu Picchu, Amazon rainforest. And Yosemite Glacier and Arches. And now we're going to save those new menu items. And again, keep in mind we have not saved the defaults yet, or saved the settings for those items yet. Oops. So you can see those items are in the menu. Now we'll go ahead and actually save the settings for each of these items. And you can see we're going to assign the image once we save it. Alright, so now we've saved all these. Oh, we also want to do Santorini. So now we've saved all these settings. Keep in mind we want to reset the defaults, because otherwise every other item that doesn't have defaults set is also going to inherit these settings, and we don't want that. So we'll save once more just to reset the defaults. Refresh our home page. And now you can see all of those items have got their proper images and have their proper item layout. Now, if those default settings, if you found that confusing, you certainly don't have to use it. It's just a shortcut if you'd like to. But just to recap, the way you use it is that you create an item that you want to use as the defaults for additional items. You click the Set as Defaults button and save that menu item which will set the global defaults to those settings. You add your additional items, and then for each of those additional items, you just open up the settings and click the Save Menu button. That will save those defaults as those items settings. You then come back here and click Uncheck Set as Defaults. Don't forget that you need to refresh the Menus panel before you actually save the settings in order for them to take effect. But you'll do that automatically when you add your new items anyway by saving the menu. So once you're done adding those items and then saving the defaults, you come back and click the Reset Defaults button, click the Save Menu Item button again, and that should do it.